Chapter 6 of Part 1 of the Lives of the Three Misses Judsons. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 6. Learning the Language. Mrs. Judson visits the wife of the Viceroy. Her sickness. Her voyage to Madras. Her return to Rangoon. Birth of a son. Those who have acquired a modern European language, with the aid of grammars, dictionaries, and other suitable books, can scarcely estimate the labor of learning without such aids. Such a language as the Burman. In fact, Mr. Judson thinks more progress can be made in the French in a few months than in the Burman in 2 years. Mrs. Judson took the whole management of family affairs on herself, in order to leave her husband at liberty to prosecute his studies, and the consequence was, that being obliged constantly to use all the Burman she knew in her intercourse with servants, traders, and others, her progress was more rapid than his. One cause of difficulty in learning their language was that their books were made of palm leaves, marked or engraved with an iron style or pen, without ink. We who are accustomed to clear characters on paper can hardly imagine the difficulty of tracing out these obscure scratches on the dried palm leaves. Another was that, in writing, their words are not fairly divided like ours, by breaks and points and capitals, but run together in a long continuous line, a sentence or paragraph seeming like one word. Another difficulty was, that in their idiom, a great variety of verbs must be used to express one action, either as performed by persons of a different rank, or as done under different circumstances. Thus there are 3 or 4 ways to speak of eating rice, sleeping, drying, etc., one of which is always used of the king, another of the priests, another of the rulers, and another of the common persons. And it would be an insult to use a phrase lower than one is entitled to. Again, our term to wash, for instance, there are many words. One is used to wash the face, another the hands, another linen, another dishes, etc. They have in their language 11 vowels and 33 consonants, but of these there are so many combinations that about 1,000 characters must be used in printing. Printing, however, was unknown to the Burmans until our missionaries introduced it. As no progress at all could be made in their missionary labors until the language was mastered, they applied themselves cheerfully and diligently to its acquisition. An interesting incident is related by Mrs. Judson under date of December 11th, 1813, her first visit to the wife of a man in power. Today, for the first time, I have visited the wife of the Viceroy. I was introduced to her by a French lady who has frequently visited her. When we first arrived at the government house, she was not up, consequently we had to wait for some time. But the inferior wives of the Viceroy diverted us much by their curiosity in minutely examining everything we had on, and by trying on our gloves, bonnets, etc. At last her Highness made her appearance, richly dressed in the Burman fashion, with a long silver pipe in her mouth, smoking. At her appearance all the other wives took their seat at a respectful distance, and sat in a crouching posture without speaking. She received me very politely, took me by the hand, seated me upon a mat, and herself by me. One of the women brought me a bunch of flowers, of which she took several, ornamented my cap. She was very inquisitive whether I had a husband and children, whether I was my husband's first wife, meaning by this whether I was the highest among them, supposing that Mr. Judson, like the Burmans, had many wives, and whether I intended tarrying long in the country. When the Viceroy came in, I really trembled, for I had never before beheld such a savage-looking creature. His long robe and enormous spear not a little increased my dread. He spoke to me, however, very condescendingly, and asked whether I would drink some rum or wine. When I arose to go, her Highness took my hand again, told me she was happy to see me, and that I must come to see her every day. She led me to the door. I made my salam and departed. My object in visiting her was, that if I should go into any difficulty with the Burmans, I could have access to her, when perhaps it would not be possible for Mr. Judson to have an audience with the Viceroy. In pursuing his study of the language, Mr. Judson had fortunately secured as a teacher a Burman of more than ordinary intelligence, and who had a perfect knowledge of the grammatical construction of the Burman dialect, and also of Pali, or language of sacred books. Day after day he sat with his teacher in open veranda which surrounded their dwelling, reading, writing, and talking, joined by Mrs. Judson in every interval she could spare from family cares, and thus they were fitting themselves to teach the poor idolaters the new religion. Nor did they neglect such opportunities of doing good as presented themselves even then, but every effort to inculcate their sentiments was met by the objection, "Your religion is good for you, ours for us. You will be rewarded for your good deeds in your way, and we in ours." They found they had to deal with one of the proudest and most conceited races on earth. Their religion, as we had said before, encourages this conceit, by leading them constantly to make a merit of their good actions, or what they suppose such, while it inculcates neither contrition nor penitence. The particular doctrines of Christianity, its justification through the merits of another, its humility and charity, were in the last degree opposed to the character of the Burman race. The missionaries were made daily more sensible that the Spirit of God must come with power before the truth could ever enter those darkened understandings. Prayer was therefore their only reliance, as it was their only comfort. But even this enjoyment, as far as it was social, was soon broken in upon the increasing illness of Mrs. Judson, which obliged her to try the effect of a change of scene and climate. She could not think of taking Mr. Judson from his labours, and therefore embarked alone in January 1815, Madras. We may imagine the joy experienced by the missionary thus left behind, on receiving during her absence letters from this country, containing an account of the general movement in America in favour of the mission, and the formation of the Baptist General Convention. His heart overflowed with gratitude, and the thought that he had no friend near him. There were yet hundreds in his native land praying and labouring in the same cause, inspired him with new zeal in his beloved enterprise. Mrs. Judson's journey, though solitary, was prosperous and successful. Friends appeared for her when she least expected them. The influence of her engaging person and winning manners is observable in one obliging attention she received from even strangers. The Viceroy appointed a woman to accompany her free of expense. The captain refused money for her passage. The physician at Madras, from whom she had received visits for 6 weeks, returned the fee which she had sent him, saying he was happy if he had been of service to her. Her health being perfectly restored, she returned to Rangoon after an absence of 3 months, and on the 11th of September was made the happy mother of a little son. She soon resumed her studies, and though she saw little other result of her labours, she was cheered by noticing that she and her husband were gradually gaining the confidence of the natives, who, as she says, would say to each other that they need not be afraid to trust us, for we do not tell falsehoods as the Burmans do. The indolent and deceitful Burmans saw with surprise that these two Christians always kept themselves busily employed, and paid every debt they contracted with strict punctuality. Thus was laid the foundation of respect for the new religion. Chapter 6.